Everybody to our, I think it's 44th, wow, Climate Cafe. And tonight we're talking about biogas from waste. And we've got three amazing speakers, as usual. We've got Robin, who's going to be talking about a breakdown of Aberdeen City Council's new aerobic digestion plant and distribution system. We've got James talking about a farm-based anaerobic digestion plant, and our very own Bob Pringle talking about potential opportunities for biogas use. So by the end of this, you'll be biogassed up and know everything there is to know, hopefully, about biogas. So they'll all speak for 20 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A session after that. So what other events are happening quite soon? Well, we've got our next Climate Cafe is, as always, on the first Tuesday of the month. That's the 3rd of August for next month. Projects for low carbon in Africa. So we're going a bit outside the UK, which we don't generally do, but we are for this one. It's a bit of a, like one-off, and Adam will be comparing for that because I'm away on holiday. Yay! We also have on the 7th July, St. Fittick's Film Night. So that is, let me just get, it's definitely tomorrow night. And you can find details of that on Robert Aitken's Facebook and website page. We've got Food and Fun on the Green on the 31st of July, so the end of this month. And that's at Cromer Community Waste Project and Tarrant Climate Crisis Group. So if you just Google that, then you'll find out more details. If you're on our mailing list, then we've sent you the links in our last newsletter. We, as in ACA, as part of NESCAN, North East Scotland Climate Action Network, are doing a lot to do with COP26. And we're doing a questionnaire, we're doing some community events, and we're doing a school resource pack. And there's CPD for that school resource pack on the 25th of August. And it's MDEC that are doing that. So if you like more details, then just sign up on our newsletter and we'll be giving you more details on that. Or just go to the MDEC, that's Aberdeen for Fairer Future as well. That's what the kind of name. You can find out more details. If you are interested in having us come into your community and having an event in mid-August to mid-September about our community, our choices, what you want our community, your community to look like in 2030, then do get in contact because we're looking for places to have our events. Brilliant, thank you. And this is our media. So if you want to know more about ACA, you can visit our website, go on our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, or YouTube. And as I said, all of our virtual climate cafes are recorded and up on our YouTube channel, and this one is no exception. So in a few days, it'll be up there so you can look at everything again if you want to. Okay, so without further ado, I'd like to pass you on to Robin, sorry. Robin, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I shall share my presentation in just a few moments, and I'll just take the first opportunity to say thank you to Alison for chair, and thank you to Bob Pringle for the invitation. I've known Bob for some years, but we haven't met for a long time, and here we are digitally. So thank you for that. I'm based over in the west of Scotland, and I've left my virtual screen behind me just as an image of pretty much where I live over on the west coast, just at Ayr. So if I can make a start by sharing the screen, I have this presentation about the Aberdeen AD project. Okay, well, hopefully you can see that as my first slide. We've done a lot of Zoom, Teams, half a dozen different platforms. They're all slightly different, so it's always a little bit nerve-wracking when you get back to a presentation on a digital platform, but hopefully it's going to go smoothly. So thank you for the invitation to the Aberdeen Climate Cafe. And the image that we've got here in the background is the facility, the AD facility, commissioned by Aberdeen City Council, for which I was the initial concept developer, along with Turney as the engineering firm which actually delivered the plant. So can you actually see my presentation at this point or not?
Yes. Yes.
Excellent, because my own small screen just shows me. So assuming that everything's going on properly, and it's not. There we go. So you can see me and my background, I hope. I can't see very many of you other than 3 or 4 faces down the side of my screen, but we don't know where each of us are when we're doing Zoom meetings and so on. And I just keep talking until either I run out of things to say or the chairperson says time to stop. Hopefully you will remain awake, unlike this particular student picture. Hopefully you're going to enjoy the next few minutes, but if you do have questions or you're just falling asleep, just do indeed put something on the chat, and that'll get us moving on. So that was a little bit odd, wasn't it? The last one. Hopefully you're not asleep, but I wanted to just introduce myself a little bit in terms of how I ended up in this business of renewable energy. And it's actually, looking back, it's been quite an exciting journey. And I knew Bob Pringle from my days as a horticultural advisor, and that may seem a bit odd to some of you when we're now talking about environmental engineering. But many years ago, I started life as a horticultural scientist, which meant that on the bottom left of your screen, you'll see what in those days was a relatively sophisticated greenhouse environment. So we were growing plants under very controlled conditions, and that was mainstream horticultural business. The work that I was doing was principally research-based over here in the west of Scotland, also Ministry of Agriculture down south. But then latterly, we started to look at the environmental impact of what we were doing and those around us. And we were pioneers in the field of organics waste management, and that included composting, top right. That was an exciting part of time in that particular photograph in the Palestinian territories of the West Bank. But closer to home, we had colleagues working on things like intertidal areas in the Forth with Stirling University. And you can be in a very sensitive environmental area, but suddenly you come across rubbish and waste. And in those early years, we realized the interface between what we do and the things that people throw away was so important. But in terms of working life and work-life balance, occasionally you come across something else really exciting. So work up in the northwest of the United States, project work brings you close to orcas and so on. And this panel in the middle, I think, is really exciting. If you are wanted, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we want to move on to the main topic, but you'll see somewhere in the middle, if you want to find this as a poster, it's available by semirad.com or semi-rad.com. And it really is important about the journey we all take, because top left, whatever we do, is it hard or dirty or uncertain at times? And if it's no, it's not an adventure. But if it's yes, well, maybe it is an adventure. Is it dangerous? Are we going to die? Yes or no? And so on. And things are adventurous as we go. But the dirty, the energetic, and obviously things about whether you should write books about it, these are true in life, but it's also true in the work that we've done. And in my own working career, yes, I've seen the orcas. These are all my own pictures, but also 2/3 of the way down, did you see a bear? Yes, I saw a bear. So that is awesome. But also, all of these things make for an exciting life. And when you're a student thinking, oh dear, what are we going to calculate this or read that or whatever, it doesn't sound too exciting. But this is an exciting time in environmental science, which is where I now very much work, and commercial environmental applied science. So moving on to where I've ended up, having started in horticultural engineering, and suddenly, if you like, a light bulb moment that says, not only do we do things, but we need to recover the things that we've been doing. I found myself a few years ago, some years ago, with the question about what is a resource and what is waste. And actually often a waste becomes a resource. And by that, I mean, look at the bottom of your screen there, and you'll see that the horticulturalist or the food scientist would see a large quantity of, in this case, carrot cubes in a processing factory. But a waste manager, and now somebody interested in energy, sees those carrot cubes falling off bottom left of that center picture as an energy resource. In what we now do, the pile of rubbish towards the right of the picture, actually it's a mixed green waste, food waste, pumpkin waste. We're now growing things almost to waste in terms of the pumpkins, but can we do something else with those is the question. Other things that I've encountered, not related to Aberdeen, of course, but in the top right, you've got unusual wastes in terms of market waste in China, central picture, fish processing waste, but strangely perhaps, it's also associated in that picture with garden waste or some other form of agricultural waste from years back. And then the picture on the left of my screen with the red tin can, that's food waste. And that actually is quite an important issue because it's not just food waste in a skip. It's contaminated with a tin can and a plastic bag. And we have to work out, if we're going to use the food waste as a resource, how we also recover the tin cans and the plastic. So there are engineering solutions that we need to do that. But that picture could almost be anywhere globally. But the truth is that that is in a location that you might think of as undeveloped and difficult and not interesting from a waste management point of view, because it's maybe small, but that is in the Palestinian territories where a situation like that has a very, very big impact socially and in terms of local resource use. So that's the sort of thing that I get involved in. Now, I said to you that we were starting this journey on organic waste management through composting, and that's really where I first encountered Bob Pringle. We were composting, including for Aberdeenshire. And when you do composting on a big scale, I don't mean in a garden scale, but on a big scale, you have to ask yourself if composting is a friend or a foe. Because when you get onto a big scale, yes, you are recycling material, you are creating peat alternatives, you are recovering resources. But when you start using big machinery, you're consuming energy, and you're also potentially polluting things. You risk making smells or odor. If you don't do it properly, you can create methane problems, oxygen depletions, and so on from what you otherwise think of as a good technology. So today we think of composting as an intermediate technology. And so we turn our attention, as we did as scientists and businesses some 20 years ago, in actual fact, in terms of what the options are for anaerobic digestion, or more commonly known as AD. Now, AD is a process, as this definition says, by which microorganisms break down biodegradable material in the absence of oxygen to generate biogas, which may be used as a fuel. The biogas is used as a fuel. And beside that, you can also create and generate usable organic-based products like digestates for application to land and fertilizers and so on. And the important thing is that on an industrial scale, it's a way of managing wastes and resources to produce fuels, but it is in an enclosed and controlled environment. That is an engineered solution, and that's essential when you do these things on a big scale. So I would always ask students this particular question, and we sometimes, if we have time, would do a straw poll through the chat line, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to have you think about the question. How many of you have had, own, or operate an anaerobic digester? I know at least James has got something like that. James, if you put your hand up, I think that will be a yes, won't it? Exactly. James says yes. Most people say no, they don't have or have never operated an anaerobic digester and wouldn't know what to do with it. But actually, all of you have got an anaerobic digester. You and your digestion system just do something along those same lines. Your mouth prepares your food, you eat it, you digest it in different stages, and you produce, sad to say, digestate at the other end. You can't avoid that part of it. But from a biochemist's point of view, when we're doing this on an industrial scale, that simple flow chart looks a bit more like this. There are 4 particular steps of the biochemistry that we as engineers have to control when we're building large and safe plants. And the purpose of doing that is to create products of biogas and also digestates and fertilizers on a city scale as far as Aberdeen is concerned. Is this just messing about, or is it real industrial business? And I would say today it's really important industrial business in a Scottish context, in a UK-wide context, and in a European context as well, worldwide even. So we've got, on 2020 figures, just short of 600 plants in the UK. I'm going to cherry pick a few particular points here. The point is, we're now talking big numbers nationally. As far as energy is concerned, it's becoming a significant part of the green economy. And from the point of view of employment, of industrial activity, there's a core of, it may seem a small number of 125 project design engineers, but these are really the highest trained engineers in the business. And there's nearly 1,000 construction and engineering jobs around that, 1,500 operation and maintenance jobs, and then all the other parts of industry, of feedstock supplier and around. And this is a really important aspect for Aberdeen, because you build one plant and you surround that plant with other businesses of supply, farming, and so on. So that's what they would refer to as multipliers. Now, as a group and as businesses, we're just a small part of the network that we operate in. But I just wanted to give you this is one of my favorite pictures of a plant that our group built in Sweden. This isn't a Scottish picture, but it is in many ways defining our objective as a group, to define and to produce green energy while protecting the environment. Our environments, whether you're in Scotland or Sweden or anywhere else in the world, it's a sensitive world that we're trying to engineer solutions into. So that's a perfect project from a few years back, and Aberdeen is where we're moving to talk about. Just a few other scenic pictures of anaerobic digestion types, and they look a little bit clumsy and clunky, these particular ones, but top left, big agricultural plant in the Netherlands. On the right-hand side, a Slovenian plant. The bottom one is a United States plant. All of these are ones that we've worked on as a group, and I've worked on myself. And these tend to be fairly clumsy looking things. And you have to say, well, how does that fit into an Aberdeen city context? And that's what we're going to be talking about. Because anaerobic digestion, or AD, is an embedded technology. In my opinion, AD, it has a societal role, because we buy things, we eat things, we create waste. So we buy stuff in our day-to-day lives, but we do create wastes that then have to go somewhere. So an AD plant may well produce energy, but it has to also be part of resource recovery, and it therefore has to be a circular solution for a city or for a society. And that's really quite different from other renewable energy solutions, particularly wind power or solar, which I define as end of pipe. In other words, they sit on a hillside, they do something, but for you and me, they may appear to do nothing. AD technology is embedded in our cities and towns. And circularity of an AD installation, you as a householder may only look to the bottom left. You're hoping that the truck appears every week and collects your waste at the curbside, your waste collection, and takes your food waste away. Or there may be another environment or another situation that applies to your business. But fundamentally, most individuals only think of the bottom left. But your waste collection goes to a digestion system, the bigger box in the middle, but it has a contribution to an energy industry in the yellow at the top of exporting energy and biogas and where that gas goes. And then to the right in the white, it creates materials like fertilizers, digestates that are then used. And they're used for food production. and the energy goes back to the householder and to industry, and the food production creates food for industry and goes back to the householder. And that's what I mean by circularity, which solar and wind power really don't quite do. So what was Aberdeen doing when it thought about ED? It had already set out a program in its strategy to be a world-leading city for low-carbon technology, and these particular headlines were taken from a number of documents that the city created over the previous years, in the last 5 years or so. The city aims to be the world's largest demonstration of hydrogen fuel cell buses. That's not quite an AD connection. It wanted to create a hydrogen infrastructure in Aberdeen, not quite AD, but renewable energy. It wanted to produce hydrogen from an electrolyzer, not quite AD, but hang on a minute, where do you get the electricity from to produce hydrogen? If it's just out of ordinary electricity generation, then it's not a green circle. So there's the germ of the idea. Other issues related to hydrogen you'll be familiar with, simply because within the city it's a case of seeing those buses and so on, and it's well known of that element of the concept. The AD project, therefore, had to fit somehow into the strategy of the city. So the AD became part of the integrated renewable energy program of the city, and it was intended from very early on to put it next to the TECA, or the event centre. And that's a really important issue about the way in which the site developed. The site development was influenced by the main site completion, the other aspects of what was going on there. It's in proximity to the airport, of course. And the ones that we wanted to supply energy to then became the neighbours of the plant. And that's also really key to how the site was going to be allowed to develop. The key performance indicators were that the plant has to receive at least 50% waste. The balance can be made up of crop residues and other materials, but in tonnage terms, it had to be approximately 80,000 tonnes per annum in order to produce the biogas that the city wanted for this integrated part of the energy system, 1,500 cubic meters of biogas per hour. The target date of gas to grid was the 31st of January last year, 2020. And there are various options of creating biogas for the gas grid, biogas to the hydrogen network via the TECA, and it also had to be self-sufficient in power generation, what I would term island mode. Now, these two pictures look remarkably similar, and it's fantastic to see that they do. The uppermost one is actually an artist's impression of the TECA from a few years ago. So that was long before it was ever built. The picture on the right is the reality of what actually was constructed. So it's fantastic to see such realization of that vision. The way in which the project has become integrated is increasingly important, and to use the modern term, smart. So it not only is a standalone AD facility, but contractually and from a business point of view and making all the pieces work together, it has to integrate with, particularly from the feedstock supply. Keenan's are a well-known company in the Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire area for the collection and supply of feedstocks. There's a separate contractual agreement between Aberdeen City Council and Keenan's for that. Also, industrial food grade wastes such as distillery wastes come into the plant, and other agricultural materials are sourced off-site by the agricultural industry sector and transported into the site. So it's important that it's not a competitive issue against existing businesses. It has to integrate those businesses into what's happening on the plant. We're beginning now to show a few pictures here of what the site actually looks like. And it's an issue of scale. We haven't time to go into the real detail here, but this is one of the largest plants of its type, clearly in Scotland, but certainly across the UK. And internally within the digesters, which you cannot see because they're closed today with all the material in them, but this picture just gives you the scale of what one of 3 digesters handling 80 or so thousand tons of Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire wastes looks like. These great big slow turning paddles agitate your waste and turn it into biogas. We did have a few challenges on the way. We got to the point where gas to grid literally just into 2020 was achieved, but the site did have still a lot of items to complete at that point. And really that was just in the few weeks before COVID kicked in. So the plant was nearing completion, but this picture just says we were really at risk of grinding to a halt at that point. By that time, of course, the plant was fully roofed over and so on. But the year of 2020 has been so stressful and difficult to actually organize the finishing off of the site. And the site manager, Andrew Black in particular, has done an amazing job to achieve that. So the way that the site looks today is it is a good neighbor. It's a good neighbor to the Teca. And indeed it has to be, because so many thousands of people that will be going over the future to the Teca do not want to know that there's a food waste processing plant almost at the doorstep. The engineering is of the highest grade to make sure that's true. So top left, high grade engineering, center left, an island power generating unit so that the site is totally self-managing its own power requirement. And then on the right, one of the few aerial shots that we've been allowed to achieve in such proximity to the airport. The airport on the site, this is a pre-construction site. The airport is just that curve, that's the perimeter there. I don't know if you can see my own cursor, but towards the top of that picture, right at the edge of the digesters, which were being roofed at the time of that picture. And then the majority of the buildings are the Teca. So it's our real target of being part of an environmental package around the Teca indeed become our fierce critics, and hopefully everybody's happy in that respect. But that's always the conflict of embedding renewable energy into our own society, of embedding this particular facility, which today you can see is a clean, finished, industrial, but nonetheless positive looking facility that's there today. It looks clean, and by which I mean it belies the fact that internally in the plant we are receiving thousands and thousands of tons of agricultural and food waste, and yet the neighbours don't know it. And that is the beauty of this. We did encounter a number of oddities on the way. I jokingly say that the Aberdeen AD plant is the only stealth plant in the world, by which I mean we were required, because of proximity to the airport, to build the strangest fence you ever did see to try and break up the, well, to specifically break up the radar appearance of the plant in relation to the boundary of the airport. I don't know of any other plant that is in that position anywhere in the world. And so that's where we are. That's the philosophy behind the plant. I'm very happy to take other questions. But as a group and as a company, we don't stop there. We are doing lots of exciting things as well as working with the city here. We are currently working on AD systems in Scandinavia, both wet systems and dry systems. We're also part of a working group with the United States Environment Protection Agency, looking at AD systems for permafrost areas for Alaskan native villages, and also high altitude AD in the Andes. And these things, it comes back to what I said earlier, you never know quite where you're going to end up in this business. So we do keep our feet on the ground with these large industrial projects such as Aberdeen, and we're very proud to have done so. We're also very proud to have a connection through Aberdeen University and the Renewable Energy Engineering MSc course. So in such a short amount of time, I can't give you more than a taster to the background of the project, to the picture which is now in the background of my final slide here, to say thank you for your attention and thank you for the invitation to talk to you and to introduce the enthusiasm that the team has and the enthusiasm for Aberdeen as a city.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Robin. That was very interesting.